Okay, so Parshas Mishpatim is so full of different mitzvahs, of different scenarios in the laws of Ben Adam Chavero, of Beis Din, of all sorts of things like that. So I wanted to focus on one halacha which Rav Hirsch says should really be classified with the specific ones that really are specific to Am Yisrael and make us who we are. He says just like Shabbos and other things, he says, and that's Ribbis. The Isser of Ribbis, the Isser to take interest. Now again, the topic is vast, any way you look at it. It's vast in Machshava, it's vast in Halacha, right? The details are there. I heard a fascinating shir from Basher Weissschlita about the question of, is Ribbis something that should be classified under Isser v'Heter, right? Because we find in the Torah Shulchan Aruch it's in Yeridea, like we have all sorts of things like meat and milk and treifas and such. Or is it Choshen Mishpat? Is it a form of gezel, of stealing of some kind? And the Rambam does have it in the halachas of halva, right? In Choshen, in the idea of Mishpatim. So again, that's something which is spoken about and debated in many different ways, but it's clear that Ribbis is very unique. So it's pointed out by many Mefarshim that intuitively Ribbis does not seem like an evil thing, right? In other words, we rent all sorts of stuff. If I have a car and I rent it to you, I take money for it. If I have a house and I rent it to you, I take money for it. So if I have money and I rent it to you, why shouldn't I be paid for lending you money and you get use and benefit out of the money?
In the financial world,
correct.
Money is a product.
Yeah.
It's treated right. It's called a product, actually.
Right. So that's something that's there. It's my. I produced it, however I did, and I give it to you. And oftentimes in Ribbis, the person who wants the loan is begging you for the loan. He's saying, "I'll give you 10% interest. I really need cash up front right now," and he will thank you profusely for giving him a loan with Ribbis that you helped him out. That's it, correct. The thank you is Ribbis Devarim. So therefore, right, but nonetheless, we can't do it. That's why Rav Hirsch says that this is not something that's just intuitive. It's not something that people would come up with in their financial dealings. This is something unique for Am Yisrael. It has to do with how we view money, meaning that all money is really that of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And it has to do with how we view Am Yisrael, that Am Yisrael are really one, right? And the idea that we can lend to each other and help each other out is meant to bring us together. I'd like to focus, though, now on another aspect of it, though, at the roots of the evil of Ribbis, so to speak, in the context of Am Yisrael, and what the opposite is in terms of the world of bracha. And this I found in a fascinating introduction that was written by Rabbi Yonasan David Shlita in his introduction to the Otzim of Farshiyat Talmud on the parak in Bav Metzia that deals with interest. It's Ezu Neshech. And it was dedicated in memory of his mother-in-law, the wife of Rav Hutner Zatzal. And he says he wants to give us a little te'ima achas, a taste, a little taste of why Rav Hutner wanted a sefer written about Ribbis, and he felt it was important. So he takes us to Tanakh. He takes us to Malachim Beis, Perek Daled, where it tells us, V'isha achas minashei b'nei hanavim tza'aka el Elisha lemor. There was a woman who was a wife of one of the B'nei Hanavim. B'nei Hanavim is in certain ways called like Nevim in training, right? People that are not yet kavua in their nevuah, but they're doing in their learning, right? Rashi says, Talmidei Nivaya. And she says, Avducha ishi mes. My husband, your servant, died. Va'ato yadata ki avducha haya yareyas Hashem. And you know that my husband, your servant, was God-fearing. Who's she talking about? It says this was Ovadia. This was the wife of Ovadia. Now, Ovadia did a very brave thing. Achav and Izevel, as we know, tried to kill all the Nevi'ei Hashem, and he hid them away. and he supported them. He gave them everything he had to keep them alive. And towards the end, he actually had to borrow money with interest from the king, from Achav's son, Yoram, right, in order to be able to feed the Nevi'im. Again, the Torah forbids it, but it was pikuach nefesh. He had to save their lives. And now he died, and his almana is in big trouble. Right? It says, "V'hanoshe bo lokach es shnei yolodai lo la'avodim." And the, collector, so to speak, the lender, is coming to take my two sons to be servants in order to pay off the debt, in order to work off the debt. And then we have the famous answer of Elisha. He says, "Ma eseh lo chagidi li?" What can I do for you? Tell me. "Ma yesh loch babayis?" What do you have in your house? "Vatomer ein l'shivchos l'kol babayis ki masuch shemen." All your maidservant has at home is a little bottle of oil. Vayomer, he told her, "L'chi shali lach kelim min hachutz me'es kol shchenayich." Go borrow kelim, bottles, pots, pans, whatever it is, jugs from all your neighbors. Kelim reikim, empty kelim, al tam'iti. Ubos v'sagar tadelas ba'dechu bad banayich. Close the door, right? There's a certain idea, a nes was about to happen, and there is a certain nisim that have to be done privately. V'yatzakta kol kelim oile v'amole tasi. And you will pour into all of these kelim and then take away that which is full and replace it with an empty one and keep filling up. And so it was, right? This filled up, and he told her, "Go, l'chi michrias hashemen, right? V'shalmi es nishech. Go sell the oil, pay back the ones who you owe to. V'atu b'naich tichi banosa. And you and your children will be able to live off of this oil, which is here, which is left." So it's interesting that Chazal say that Ovadia actually was very careful with the idea, the halachas of Ribbis, and he didn't lend with Ribbis. And that was why, aside from the time that he had to do it for Pikuach Nefesh, and that was why this bracha particularly came here. So Rabbi Yonasan explains like this. He says, "B'vadai shedvarim elu einam begeder ma'aseh shehoya kach hoya." Right? We tend to read these stories. Okay, that was a nice story about Elisha. We like stories like that. It has a cool miracle, happy ending. It's very good. He says, "Ela nireh sha'adavar nimshach achar klolios inyono shel Elisha." In other words, he says this nes was brought about through Elisha Hanavi. And not every Navi is interchangeable. They each have their particular characteristics. He said, what do we know about Elisha? Before his master, Eliyahu Hanavi, passed away, he asked to receive Pishnayim Berucho, right? Like this double power, the spirit of Eliyahu Hanavi. In what way? Hachios Mesim, to bring the dead back to life. Eliyahu did that, and Elisha did that with the son of the Isha Shunamis. Now, what does that have to do with oil and with Ribbis? The Ramban explains the following about the mitzvah of the shulchan in the Mishkan. Right? Just to mention parenthetically, it was a very clever thing. There was once, I think it was the Chidah, that a certain person wanted a letter of recommendation from him to raise money in Chutz La'aretz. And the Chidah was in a tight spot because it was hard for him to say no, but he really didn't think so highly of the person. So he wrote a very flowery letter to the rabbis of whatever towns he would go to, and he said there, this person, right, if he had been a Keli in the time of the Isha Shunamis, he said, so then, of Eshes Ovadia, so the oil never would have stopped, right? Meaning, this guy's an empty Keli, right? That was the way he, so that was how he phrased it. So the Ramban says about the Shulchan, right, which is the source of Shefa, of Bracha, of Parnasa to Am Yisrael. The Shulchan, the table in the Mishkan that had the Lechem HaPanim on it. He says, Ki birkas Hashem eiseyos ha'olam lo niver yesh me'ayim ela olam k'minhaga noeg. From the time of the creation of the world, Bracha comes to us not ex nihilo, not something created from nothing, but, he says, the world has in it roots, a shoresh. And from what starts in this world, bracha comes and increases from it. That's why Elisha asked her, Hagidi no mayesh lach babayis. In other words, why not just go like this and have there be magic oil? The bracha, he was tapping into something. He needed to find a shoresh, a root on which bracha could take hold and then multiply. Okay, so in Eliyahu, with a similar nace, where there was a kada kemach and a bottle of oil, and he said, so too we find with the shulchan on the lechem haponim, there were 12 loaves of bread, but from that sova, satisfaction, right, comes to all of Am Yisrael. And Chazal tells us that a Kohen who got a tiny piece of lechem haponim, as small as a little bean, would be totally full from eating that. Meaning, everything in this world has the ability to be a source of bracha, a source of ever-flowing, ongoing bracha. Now he says, this is what the Navi was doing here. Elisha wasn't creating something out of nature, but he was actually tapping into the very deepest nature of nature, if you say so. Hashem said when he created the world, the Bria was Tov Ma'od. It was very good. Very good means Malaya Bracha. Okay? That it was full of bracha, meaning everything in this world. Remember, bracha, the Sforim point out, has the twos. The letter Beis, which is 2, Reish, which is 200, Kaf, which is 20. Right? It's the idea of multiplying. Right? That's the idea of bracha. The very word bracha, the Rashba has a tshuva about this. It means this idea of flowing and going. So he says, we find this in the idea of tzmicha. Right? The famous statement, they say that a person can count how many apples are on a tree, but you can't count how many trees are in an apple. Right? Because from that seed that's inside of an apple, an endless number of trees can come out. Right? That's the concept of tzmicha, of constant growing. He said that's an expression of the Tov Ma'od in the Bria. So what stopped it from its original sense? The Chet of Adam Arishon. Suddenly, he was told, V'kotz v'dardar tatzmiach lach, that in your fields, which have this power of tzmicha, of growth, which theoretically should just keep going and bring bracha, there are now opposing forces. Weeds, right? We have some gardeners here, right? Weeds represent the weeds and thorns. The kotz v'dardar represent these opposing forces to that power of bracha and that growth which is there. So what Elisha did here was simply bringing that bottle of oil back to its true state of Tov Ma'od, to the original state in the Bria. And therefore it became something which just constantly was flowing with bracha. The Medrash says, right, that when Elisha told her, take the full containers away and put an empty one in its place, and he's told her, that original bottle of oil that keeps flowing and pouring, don't move it from its place. HaKadosh Baruch Hu has made it like into a wellspring. Right? The idea of a wellspring, a ma'ayon, is it's defined, it's ma'im chaim. It's always flowing, always bringing out. But he says, Ein derech mayon lazuz mimkomo, meaning this was not just something that was happening above the world. He says this has its place in the world of nature. This is now a spring of olive oil that's flowing from this bottle. Don't move it around. Springs don't move around. Okay, so therefore he told her that this would be the source. What does this have to do with Ribbis? Says Maral in his Drush on Shabbos HaGadol, when he writes about the Isra of Ribbis, Chazal said, the onesh, the punishment of someone who takes Ribbis again. Ribbis is an interesting law that the one who takes Ribbis, the one who gives Ribbis, even the Sofer who writes a contract, which is there on Ribbis, are all punished. But the one who takes the Ribbis is that he doesn't rise up in Tchias HaMesim. Why particularly? Right? It's like we have a menu of different punishments we can throw at people. We say, this guy taking interest, not getting up at Tchias HaMesim. And it's hard to understand. Again, as we said, intuitively, it doesn't seem that evil. Right? A person says, I worked hard for this money. I'm happy to let you have it. Just, I'd like the money to work for me. Right? I would be investing it. Now you're going to be using it. Let that be my investment. And the person's begging him for the loan and saying, thank you, thank you. Okay, but what's happening is the following. He says it's midah keneged midah because the one who takes ribbis has entered the world of the shefa of chaim of his friend. Meaning, the concept of money that a person has is supposed to be a source of bracha. It's supposed to bring life. Okay, that's what it is. It may come in the form of bills or checks or stocks or something like that, but it's shefa min hashamayim. It's the life force that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us. And he says, this is not like gezel that I'm taking it, but what I'm doing is I'm transforming your parnasa into something which eats away at you, into something that destroys you. That's why it's compared to the nachash, to the snake, right? Rashi says that neshech is called neshech because he says, "Hu kineshichas nachash." It's like the bite of the snake. Shenoshech chabur katana beraglo ve'eno margish. The bite of the snake, he makes a little puncture in the person's foot. The person doesn't even feel it. But suddenly, pitomu mevatzves v'nofeach al kol kodo. But then it spreads and goes and reaches all the way from head to toe. Kach ribbis eno margish ve'eno nikar. So too ribbis, the person doesn't sense it, he doesn't see it. Right now, he's got a loan, he's got cash, his account's full, he's happy. He's not paying attention to the fact that it's building and building, and then it's going to eventually destroy him. So he says that's why this person who gives money with interest, lends money with interest, on one hand, it's an action of giving to someone else. And that itself is an expression of bracha, of blessing, which is just supposed to bring more and more blessing. But you've transformed it into something that brings more and more curse, that brings more and more venom that spreads through this person's world. He says it's the hepech ha-bracha, right? In other words, if you start off with some money, the concept of bracha is it's supposed to grow and multiply. He says here, it's something which is eating away at you. Maral says, right, it's like the bite of something that it makes you missing something. You're lost. And therefore, that's why it's so difficult. Now, what we see here on the opposite is the great praise that Chazal give for what's called Gemilus Chasadim. Right, Gemilus Chasadim, when a person gives without taking interest, right, that's something which is so praiseworthy because, number one, a person has to fight against his nature, but it shows that a person understands the nature of the money that he's given. The money that he's given is meant to be a source of bracha and not a source of klala. Now again, that bracha can take the form of you investing it and working with it. But as Rav Hirsch said, when it comes to Am Yisrael, that are meant to be one, right? That are meant to be one person, that means the bracha can spread, is meant to spread from one person to the other, right? It says in introducing this, that when a person, im kesef talves ami, right? So Rabbi Shmuel said, Rashi brings, that this im is not a reshus. It's not, if you feel like you're actually supposed to lend people money if you're able to. Again, you're able to protect yourself to make sure that you will get paid back, right? People that run a free loan society, a gemach, they have to be very careful that the money will be paid back or else they can't keep doing it. Okay, but it's something that a person is supposed to do. Am Yisrael is supposed to lend to each other. And lending in many ways is more respectable than just giving a handout of tzedakah. The person doesn't feel embarrassed to take a loan as opposed to that. And here if you turn this loan from something that could be beautiful without interest into something that turns into a curse or a klala, so that's why it's compared to the idea of the nachash. That's why it's compared to the idea of the snake.
Our Chaim says, Imach, it's not your money, it's Imach. It's what I gave it to you to give to him. You're only the shliach.
Right. Chazal says that that a rich person has to view it that money is simply parked with him, and the money that he has happens to belong to poor people. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted people to give, and your job is just to find and to distribute the extra money that you have to them. Right? Very good. That's the Imach. Now, another thing we find in the Parsha that's similar, and I just wanted to compare the two, is Lashon Hara. Right? There also the snake appears. Right? On one hand, the Chavetz Chaim brings, that was the umnus of the Nachash. The Nachash, in speaking to Chava, is really saying Lashon Hara about HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the Chavetz Chaim brings in the introduction from the Zohar Kodesh that when a person speaks Lashon Hara, you awaken and give strength to this primal nachash, this power that prosecutes and pursues Am Yisrael in the world. And there too, it's very similar. Why is Lashon Hara so damaging? So the Chavetz Chaim says that our very source of life is speech. It describes the creation of man, Vayya Adam Lenefesh Chaya. Everybody points to the famous Targum Onkelos, the Ruach Mamalala, to a speaking spirit. Now, some people get worried when they watch a National Geographic and they see Coco the chimp saying that he wants a banana, and then a lecture about the whales, songs to each other, and all the different communications. We know that animals could communicate, even plants communicate. They say, Shlomo HaMelech knew these things. Why is it that we say that only man speaks? Because it's the idea of words that bring bracha, of words that change the world, that transform the world. That's the power that a person has. Moves v'chaim biyad halashon, it says in Mishlei, that the tongue, the ability to speak, has two sides. It has the ability of moves, right? It's very powerful. It can bring death. On the other hand, it's meant to bring life, right? Because that's the nefesh chaya. That's what the human being is supposed to be. He's supposed to walk in the footsteps of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who's the nosein, and you're supposed to be giving with what you have. So here too, the idea is that a person can turn that bracha into a curse, or you can actually use it as it should be. So Rabbeinu Yonah says in Mishlei, on that pasuk, Mavis v'chaim biyad Lashon, the death and life are in the hands of the Lashon. He says, Acharei ki mavis v'chaim biyad Lashon, since death and life are in the hands of the tongue. Misha oiv Lashon, if a person likes speaking, right, and values speech, we're supposed to. Hu isha chafetz l'daber tomid, right, and this person may want to speak a lot, right? Different people are talkers, right? They always say the Chavetz Chaim talked a lot. It really surprised people when they came. They thought that he would just answer in monosyllables, and he wanted to show people there's lots of kosher talking you can do. Because he says in the introduction to the Sefer, one of the arguments of the Yetzer Hara shows you the Sefer Chavetz Chaim. He says, if you want to have no social life, follow the book, right? You'll have no friends, no communication, no anything. Look, everything, asr, 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 look how big the book is. He says, no, there's lots of kosher talking. So this is what Rabbeinu Yonah says. So you like to talk. Yishtadel lekabel tamid sachar alav. Guess what? You can talk in a way that brings you reward. Yedaber b'divrei chachma. Speak things of wisdom. V'tochachos chayim v'shalom v'emes. Things of life and peace and truth. V'yochal pri Lashon. And you will benefit from the fruits of the tongue. Ki achayim biyad halashon. Right? So he says, therefore, and he says, you know what? The more you talk in that positive way, he says, then you'll talk less Lashon Hara. Because a person is very aware of the power within him, of the power of speech. But it has to be, you have to use it. So therefore, use it in the positive way. And therefore, a person has to look at money in that way as well. You have to look at it as something that's actually gives you the ability to give. Rav Dessler said that a person can be a very successful businessman, all based on the force of wanting to give. Right? You want to give people a good product. You want to give them good service. Now, of course, you have to make a profit or else you won't be able to keep giving. But you can be a giver. So this is how this opens up to us. Ribbis opens up to us what we're supposed to be doing in Am Yisrael. Every interaction with another person is supposed to be one that brings bracha. That's what each person is supposed to do. It should be that after the interaction, whether it's from your words, right? And this, they point out that tzedakah with words is very powerful because rich people and poor people need kind words. And words can bring you to life. It's the flip side. There's an isser called onoas devarim, saying hurtful words to a person. And Chazal say, Gedol onoas devarim onoas mamon. The word onoah is used both on hurting people with words and on overcharging. In certain halachic cases in which the deal will be canceled. So they say, Gadol onoas dvarim me'onas mamon. The magnitude of the damage you do with hurtful words is worse than overcharging a person. Imagine how angry we get when someone rips us off. You went to a store and suddenly you see in every other store it's half the price. Right? We're boiling over. It says, but why is it that onos dvarim are worth? One aspect they bring is you can't take it back. Okay, money, you can do tshuva and you can go, the store owner who overcharged you can say, I'm sorry, I'm going to pay you back. It's very hard to do that onos dvarim. But it also says onos dvarim is begufo. That's in the person himself. Onos mamon is simply b'mamono. So the flip side of words of encouragement, right, of words, it's such a beautiful word in Lashon HaKodesh. Encouragement is le'oded. That means to make a person more. That's the very expression of bracha, right? So the idea of doing that, so that's begufa, that's in the person himself. You make a person more. That's what we're supposed to look to be doing with each other. The Sfarim say that especially a person can be very tricky with Ribbis. You can see that a person has something you want, and you offer him a loan with interest, knowing that he probably won't be able to pay and you'll foreclose on that thing that you want. That's why it says, especially that you have to remember, to fear Hashem, because there's so many ways that a person can do this. That's not the way you're supposed to look at another person, as prey for your ambitions. You're supposed to look at each person as a possibility for your bracha. And then, if you look at the world that way, you are connecting to your root in Kedusha, like that bottle of shemen that was there with Elisha, and you can become a source of never-ending bracha. That's what we're supposed to be. And that's with all those complicated halachas of Ribbis that when you look into the books and you can try to see, but that's what it's really telling us about who we are and what we're supposed to be. Have a wonderful week.